Nick, thanks for your time. You gave a fascinating presentation in there talking about the future of video with the BBC and particularly with the iPlayer. Maybe for the audience, if you could just repeat some of the points you raised there about how video online is now such an integral part of what the BBC does.
Yeah, I mean, the first 10 years of the internet was really about text and images, and that's not really what the BBC was about, because that's more familiar to sort of print and newspapers. So now that the internet is capable of taking high quality video, or certainly medium quality video, then obviously we're coming to our own. So audio first with podcasts and now video, and we're seeing extraordinary growth in audio video. So we launched the iPlayer, which is TV on demand, just over a year ago, and we've gone from 0 to 300 million plays on the PC internet, and we've obviously been running news and sport clips for some time, but we're seeing extraordinary rates of growth. So last year alone, 150% growth in news and about 60 or 70% in sport, and again some sort of record-breaking events like the Barack Obama inauguration and live streaming around the Olympics. So just incredible growth. I mean, one really telling statistic was around the Olympics this summer. 38 million plays of audio video during those 2 weeks in Beijing, and 4 years before in Athens it was 2.4 million. So after one day of Beijing, we'd outstripped all the video served in Athens.
What does that do then to consumption habits, and particularly to your viewing audiences for the traditional BBC television and radio stations? Are you seeing a shift in activity?
I mean, to be honest, we're still learning. We're still trying to understand what the change is. I'd say it's complementary. So, people felt that what you would see is a decline in television and online would kind of make up the gap. Mm-hmm. But in some places you're seeing that, and amongst some audiences, for example, factual documentaries, people are watching fewer factual documentaries on television. But in other areas, actually television is holding up incredibly well, and what people are doing is they are using the internet at different times in different places. They're consuming more media, so it's complementary. So just because you happen to watch a clip of sport online in the office doesn't mean to say you're not going to watch the full, match of the day highlights football package on a Saturday evening. So I think it's complementary, but obviously there are certain areas where it's not.
There's one thing that on demand gives you is the ability to choose from whatever content's available and play it whenever you like. Are you finding that people do actually want to become their own television programmers, or is there still a desire for people simply to turn the box on, sit back and see what you'll throw at them?
It's very early days, and we're not quite sure. And the patterns that you see today may not be the patterns of tomorrow. I think that at the moment, most of what's out there is not in a very navigable form. So the internet, all the text and images, you can search, and Google's done a fantastic job at allowing people to navigate through that in an on-demand way. Video's kind of not there. It's more difficult because you've got to do speech to text or image recognition to make it really navigable, or you've got to improve the quality of metadata to do that in consistent ways. So I think that's going to happen over the next 5 years or so, and then we're going to see consumption patterns change probably.
What role do you see long term then for your traditional radio and television properties? There's broadcast programmed, we'll tell you what's on and when to watch it type model?
It's definitely not going to replace it. I mean, every kind of media that came along, they said, okay, that's the end of radio when television came along, and online, that's the end of television. And it just hasn't. It's just like another layer of things. It's like Twitter comes along, that's the end of Facebook. Well, that's the end of blogging. It isn't. It's just kind of another layer, and everything's getting more and more complex. So I think it's kind of a bit like that. I mean, what we're seeing in the UK at the moment is a kind of rebirth of live television. Bizarrely, because in a way people are still looking for that shared experience. Mm-hmm. And so on a Saturday night they come together and they watch these great Saturday night entertainment shows in bigger numbers than they've ever done before. But what's different is that it's complemented by some of the online stuff. So those television shows on Saturday evening involve two-way participation enabled by whatever it is, mobile phones or internet, mm-hmm. And voting and all those kind of things. And so it's kind of it's led to a rebirth of television. It's kind of counterintuitive. How
does the financial model for this stack up then? I mean, as an organisation, you're not having to sell ads and therefore attract an audience that you can resell to an advertising base. Do you think the world would be different for the BBC if you were having to respond to those commercial imperatives in terms of what you're doing?
We primarily get our money from licence payers in the UK, but we also have commercial models outside the UK. So we do take ads, and we have the same pressures outside the UK to pay for the distribution and to put back into the content. Also in the UK for some time we've had BBC Worldwide, so monetising the programmes over a particular period of time, and I think those things are going to continue. So there will always be a mix of public service and licence pay, and then beyond that we're trying to increase our revenue, increase the quality of programmes, either through partnerships or through commercial, where we're allowed to, and that doesn't create too much market impact.
Yep. And one of the areas you also talked about was the notion of distributing content everywhere. So content doesn't even necessarily need to be tied to a BBC portal as such. You're actually allowing it to be free, well, not quite freely, but openly distributed elsewhere. How hard was it to make that decision to basically let go of some of the ownership of what it is you're producing?
I think for a lot of organisations that's quite a big thing. You know, you've had decades, or in some cases, 100 years or more of media companies, and the whole point is for people to come to your masthead or come to your property, and it's a kind of a different way of thinking. But I think the value of it is potentially huge. I mean, we started 10 years ago in trying to be really open and transparent in giving out our headline feeds and RSS feeds, and we now have 75 million click-throughs back to the BBC site a month. And we want to extend that now to video and widgets and all these things that enable that to happen. And we think that branding's still important. It's really important that we get credit for that. So it's not necessarily just giving our links out. We need to think about how you do it. But I think the principle, everyone wins, because people can take our content and use it appropriately, but we also get the credit. Our rights holders get the credit too. You
talked a lot about the ability to distribute content through the iPlayer onto Nokia's N95, onto the iPhone, where I think you said you had 3% of content was consumed on that device. Pretty much everywhere but the living room. Is that the final stage, to actually bring the iPlayer back to the central hub of the house, being the TV in the living room?
Yeah, it's not. We do have it on Virgin TV in the UK. iPlayer is there in the living room on the television, and in many ways that's the most successful of all, as you would expect, because it's a lean back experience. So that only launched in June. We've had 100 million plays of BBC television programmes since that launched. And I think ultimately that's absolutely where it's heading. I mean, most people will watch television programmes, sit-back television programmes, on their televisions, and they'll expect it to be on demand. They'll expect to be able to navigate through it and find what they want, either over the last 7 days or 30 days, or to pay for it out of the archive. So I think the TV is going to be very big for long-form content, and then for mobile and PC, maybe stronger for short-form content. And just finally then, you mentioned that it's a relatively low-cost distribution model for you, but what are you actually doing to internet traffic? We've been hearing these frankly quite scary figures about the amount of content that you're pumping out now. Are you seeing that you're actually in some ways reshaping the web, or reshaping the way that the web industry works to accommodate what you're doing? I think everyone always talks about the internet falling over and not being able to cope, and people have been talking about that for 10, 15 years. And then you come up with a problem which is content driven, because you've got fantastic content and people want. Then people will find technical solutions to it, and yes, it causes problems for ISPs. It's causing problems, and the Obama inauguration, for example, effectively, the internet stopped working for many people. It couldn't cope. It can't cope with really big live events today. It can cope with a lot of on-demand stuff. So we're going to see a lot of technical innovation over the next year or two, and you may also need government intervention to allow. To encourage better networks as well, particularly at this time. But I'm confident it's going to be sorted out. Great. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you. Yeah.